Welcome back. In this video we're going to continue setting up the controllers and views for our application, and we're going to pay particular attention to structuring our controllers and models. So while we're at it, let's also do the questions controller, and more specifically the listing method. We will need to fetch all the questions and then we can just load the view. So in the constructor, let's do this load model and load our question model there. And then we'll load the questions inside of this data questions and make sure we fill that variable with this question model get all. For now, we're not going to use pagination, just all of the questions. Now, we do want to show the user with every question. So we could do with and then user, and that will give us all the questions with the respective users. And let's just see what that does. Scroll down to the queries. And here you see that the user is being fetched for every question that we have. Now, this is not very good for performance. So let's just refactor this. Now we're going to fetch questions with a new method that we're going to create in a minute. And that will be called get with users. And let's just go and create that right now. So we need to open up our question model and create a public function called get with users. First thing we'll do is set a DB statement of select, and the thing we want to fetch is for the questions table, we want to fetch every field. And for the users table, we want first underscore name and we want last underscore name. And then we'll just do this DB join, and we'll just join the questions table with the users table. And we're going to join on user underscore ID equals users ID. Let's just add in questions here. And then we'll just return this get all. And let's just see what that brings us. I've reloaded the page and you can see that now there's only one query being run instead of 3. Now, this is a thing that you should always be aware of when using ORMs or ORM-like constructions. They can get a bit heavy on the queries. You see, if we fetched 20 questions here, then we would have one single query to fetch all the questions, and then 20 queries to the users table to fetch all the users for those questions. While it can be done with just a single join query. Now, all we need to do is load a view. So we'll just call this load underscore view method, and we'll just call, let's see, questions / listing, and make sure I spell that correctly, of course. And while we're at it, let's just create that view. First of all, we'll create a view folder called questions, and then inside of that view folder, we'll create a PHP file called listing.php. Now inside, we'll just set a conditional and see if we have any questions. Or better still, let's just do a count for that. If we have any questions, then we can loop through them. So for each questions as question, we'll just echo a heading 2 tag, I think. And inside of that, we'll just display the questions subject, I think it was called. But then this will have to be a link, so we'll just use the Codeigniter anchor method for that. Now the URI would be questions / detail / and then the ID. So that would be questions ID, and that text would be equal to question subject. And then we want to display the name as well, so we'll do a paragraph tag, and inside of that paragraph tag, we'll do question first underscore name, and then a space, and then question last underscore name, and then another space, and then question, what was it called? I think created. So let's just see how that looks. Reload the page, and here we have it. So now we have a look at the controller again. And here you can see that the question controller, and especially the listing method, is still very clean. And while we're at it, let's just add another doc block as well. But this looks very clean and efficient. And instead of doing the join query inside of our controller, we moved it into our model. And if at a later point we need to reuse it, that's no problem because it's in our model anyway. Okay, now let's also do the detail action. Here what we're going to do is display a single question. And let's just plan what we're going to do. We're going to fetch a single question, but with its user. and with all of the answers. Now, because we also need to fetch every user for an answer, let's just break this up into 2 bits. We'll just do this data question, and to set that, we'll just run this question model, and then we'll use the get method, but we do need to pass in an ID. Now, as you'll probably remember, we passed the question ID into the URI, so we'll get it right here. And now what we want to do is get the user as well. So we'll do with user. Now that should give us the question with the user based on the ID that is passed through the URI. And then we'll just copy this line and say this data answers equals this answer model with user, and then we should use get all. Now this would give us all answers with all users, and we only need the answers for a certain question ID. So let's just set a db where statement before fetching those, and we'll just do db where questions ID equals ID. Now this where method will be run just before fetching all of these answers, so it will apply to this call here. And now what we want to do is load a view like so, and that will just be questions detail. And now before creating this view, let's just make sure we load the answer model as well, and let's just do that at the top of our class, just like we did with the question model. Okay, and with that we're ready to code the detail view, I think. Let's just go inside of our views folder, questions folder, and we'll just create a new PHP file called detail.php. Now before coding any further, let's just dump the value of variable question here, and let's also dump the value of variable answers. Let's load that in a browser. So here we have the question with the ID of 1, and here we have all the answers for that very question. And as you can see at the bottom, we're fetching the answers only once, but we're doing a different query for every answer. So ideally, you would have to refactor this and just, make a join statement of that. But let's just leave it like this right now and say that that'll be your assignment for today. So let's just clear this out and we're ready for some front-end coding. Okay, first of all, we'll create a section with a class of question, and then we'll create another section with a class of answers. And just for fun, we'll create a third section with a class of comment. Now let's just expand this. Inside of the question section, we'll display an h2 tag, and we'll just echo question subject. Now let's just see if we're getting anything. Yeah, that looks good. So let's go back and create a paragraph tag with a class of name, and inside of that we'll just echo some more, namely the question user first underscore name, and also the question user last name. And let's just indent this just for clarity, because we also want to echo something else, and that would be the question created date. And let's just prefix that with a dash. And now we need to do a little conditional. So if answers is not empty, then we know we can display answers. And then of course we need to end with an end if statement. Now inside of the answer section, let's just place an h3 tag with a class of highlight and set the text to answers. And then we'll do a for each loop for each answers as answer, and make sure there's a space there. And then we'll just end that for each loop as well. Okay, so inside of this loop will be our first answer. And let's just create an article tag for that. And inside of that, we'll have a P with a class of name and just a regular P to hold the entire answer. Now, inside of the name paragraph, we will probably be needing the same info as here. So let's just paste that in, clean it up just a little. And instead of question, we'll make sure we reference answer. And inside of the P tag, we'll just echo the text for that answer. And as for the questions, it would probably be a good idea to echo the question text as well, because I just forgot that. So make sure that that references question. And yeah, that seems to have come together pretty nicely. Let's just reload the page. And as you can see, everything seems to fall in place. We have a title, we have a first name, and the last name and the date it was created. Here's the text for the question. Then we have our answer section. We have the first name, last name and created date, and here's the text for every answer. So now all we need is a little form here that we can post a new answer to. Well, we'll just set up that form, but we'll leave processing of the form to the next video because in that we're going to talk about security. Okay, so here what we're going to do is echo a form open statement like so, and then we'll probably need a form close statement, and we'll echo a form hidden statement with the name of user and a value of this INAuth user row ID. And now what that will do is it will create a hidden form field with the name of user, and the value will be equal to the ID of the currently logged in user. So if we're posting an answer, then our user ID is automatically being posted as well. So now all that's left to do is echo a text area, and we'll just give that a name of text. And I think we also set a subject for answers, which is, well, not really necessary. So we'll just go back to the answers table and delete this subject field here. So let's just select that and click delete. And then it's back to our form. And we want to make sure we put in a submit button as well. We'll just call that submit. And it will have a value of answer this question. And while we're busy refactoring the database, let's just set the created fields for all tables to timestamp. And that way they will automatically be filled with the proper value. Timestamp, there you go. So we don't need to worry about assigning the proper values anymore. Now let's go back to our answers table and see if we have every field covered. We have ID, which can be null. User ID created, that will be the timestamp, the text. Oh yes, we have a questions ID. So let's just copy this and go back to the form one more time, and we'll just rename this to user ID and also set a questions ID, and that will be equal to this segment number 3 because the ID is in a third segment of the URI, and let's just set this to be an integer. Oops, sorry, I made a stupid mistake. That should be this URI segment ID, of course. So let's just check in the browser. Here's our form. Let's have a look at the hidden values. Here we have the user ID with the value of name, and here we have the questions ID with a value of 1. So all that's left really is a heading for the answer form, because we do want people to know that this is where you can post your answer. So once again, that will be a heading 3 with a class of highlight, and the text will be set to answer this question. We'll just need to tell the user that he can use text style markup. And basically that's just about all. Well, for the view file that is. And we'll just deal with processing the form in the next video. I'll see you then.